Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Um, Kicking us off is going to be Terry Troy from Community Leader. He is the one that, if you read the article, and some of us here were quoted in it, um, he will kick us off, followed by Julie Clark from BBU to talk about succession planning. Danielle will talk about fundraising, and then Kelly will talk about um, all things related to employees. And then I will be last, talking more about the financial side of it. So with that, I thank you for joining us, and I will hand it off to Terry.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Nonprofits Beyond the Numbers. It's presented by HW&Co and Community Leader, which is a sister publication to Cleveland Magazine. This webinar is a companion piece to an article that was published in the November issue of Community Leader. Last summer, we started talking with nonprofit leaders and people who provide professional services to the nonprofit industry to find out what was keeping executives up at night. We spoke with Rick Cohen at the National Council of Nonprofits, as well as nonprofit leadership from Northeast Ohio and professionals who specialize in services for the nonprofit industry, some of whom you'll hear from today, including Kelly Keefe, Daniel Locke, founder of Lockstep Partners, Julie Clark, Vice President of Nonprofits Engagement at Business Volunteers Unlimited, and of course, Helen, who is the Senior Director of HW&Co's Nonprofit Advisors Group. When we spoke with Northeast Ohio nonprofits, we found a lot of commonality to their concerns. When we asked nonprofits about the issues of recruiting and retaining employees, 33% cited the ability to offer competitive wages as the most important challenge. Another 20% said they had trouble finding qualified candidates, while 40% said both issues were a big challenge. Surprisingly, only 7% of nonprofits in our area said they were not struggling with recruitment and retention. When we spoke with professionals serving the nonprofit industry, we also found a lot of similarity to the operational issues facing the industry as a whole. Some are related to internal issues such as governance and financial accountability. Others face challenges from fundraising and operations. Most of the issues are caused by forces that are beyond their control. These issues can have a dramatic impact on nonprofits when it comes to the continued delivery of the goods and services to the people and communities that rely upon them. These include an increased demand for services, a decline in revenues, an increase in the cost of services, a decline in personnel and staffing, and a need for succession planning. There are also subsets and complexities of many of the issues that are addressed in the article or will be discussed here today. Succession planning, for example, should not be an issue involving just nonprofit leadership, but all key people in an organization. When you think about succession planning, it should not just be the leadership of the organization, but all key people within the organization. So succession planning and staffing really become a function of strategic planning for the entire organization. We found that very few folks had a good succession plan in place, some 53% admitting that they have nothing completed and only 27% saying they have it covered. However, almost 47% said they have a key member of their organization who is retiring within the next 5 years. I think you'll hear more about that later in our webinar. Another problem is that nonprofits are often led by people who are passionate about their cause or mission, but who often lack the business acumen or even the desire to run a business. They are the artists, musicians, and social workers who are dedicated to their specific cause. But they also need to run staffing, facilities, write grants and reports, plan events, and perform donor cultivation. Perhaps the most surprising aspect to the nonprofit industry, at least to me, was the size and scope of the industry, not just here in Northeast Ohio, but nationally. America is home to more than 1.3 million charitable nonprofits that heal, inspire, nurture, and enlighten people of every age, gender, and race, according to Rick Cohen of the National Council. I must admit that I was also taken back by the size and scope of the nonprofit sector here in Ohio and in Northeast Ohio in particular. We have a very healthy and robust nonprofit sector in Northeast Ohio. In Greater Cleveland alone, there are more than 2,900 nonprofits, according to some published resources. And each of these organizations is in competition not only for donor dollars, but government grants and personnel. It's a long-held axiom that the term nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. Despite the most altruistic intentions of a founder or founding board, nonprofits have to be run like a business. A healthy balance sheet is essential, or an organization can die on the vine. Facing ever-increasing market dynamics and pressures, nonprofits today need our help more than ever before.
All right. And it's a good segue because to talk about succession planning, which was a big talking point, in the article, is Julie Clark from BBU.
Thank you, Helen. I am really thrilled to be here with this great panel. And Terry, thanks for the article, and HW for putting this together for all of us. Succession planning is definitely a key topic. I'm going to see, do I have control? There we go. So I'm with Business Volunteers Unlimited. We are a nonprofit that is based here in Northeast Ohio. I lead our nonprofit services team and have the pleasure of working with hundreds of organizations, many of you on the WebEx today. I've had the honor of connecting with. We're 30 years old, and what we do is serve as a bridge between the business and nonprofit sectors here in Northeast Ohio with the goal of strengthening our community. So we connect, we educate, and we consult. For our nonprofits, it's about connecting to qualified and trained board members, to pro bono consultants, to direct service volunteers who can help your organizations. We also do a lot of educational programming and then offer a number of consulting services, board governance, succession planning, strategic planning, and more. So you all will have my contact information. So if there's something I can help with, would be happy to chat further. So Terry really hit on most of these. When we talk about what's going on in our nonprofit sector, there are so many strategic and financial pressures. And I think this webinar today is really going to hit on some of these big ones. But if you look at that fourth bullet point there, the war for talent, and I know Kelly's going to touch more on this, but it ties really directly into succession planning, because the need it's so important to be planning ahead and thinking about what your organization needs for the future. So if you look at this cartoon, often we hear about, what if somebody gets hit by a bus? How do we keep the organization going? So that's succession planning. We like to think a little more positively. What if you win the lottery? What if you hit that big jackpot? And again, it's a best practice. It's thinking, it's like insurance for your organization, and it really, really ties to sustainability. So it's important. We have turnover happening with nonprofit organizations. Historically, about a third of nonprofits are filling those roles internally. And on the business side, it's 2/3 that are filling those roles internally. So having that, often it's that we don't have the depth within our organizations to move people up and through the organization. But it's really important as part of succession planning that we're investing and we're growing our leaders over time. In that middle pie chart, Nonprofit HR did a survey and said that 45% of nonprofit employees said in the next 5 years, they're going to be looking for something different. And almost a quarter of those folks said they're going to be looking outside the nonprofit sector. So again, that war for talent is absolutely real. And Kelly's going to talk a little bit later about some of those attraction and retention strategies that we can use. Hiring from, there we go. Okay, so the value of succession planning, again, it's about sustainability for your organization and making sure that you're able to continue delivering on your incredible mission and doing the great work that you're doing. You want to make sure that you're identifying those future leaders, folks who can potentially move up down the road, and understanding those vulnerabilities and risks. What are the gaps that we have? We don't have somebody else who can backfill and do something. So succession planning is really about mitigating some of those risks. When we think about succession planning, as I said, it's a best practice for everybody, but there are a few situations where it's even more important and just absolutely critical. One of those is if you've got a really strong chief executive. That's fantastic. We want those really strong leaders, But if that person is owning most of the critical relationships, if that person is taking on more and more of the work, and I know in many of our organizations, we're lean and mean. So, there's not, a huge structure below that chief executive oftentimes. So while it's great that we have that high level of trust with that chief executive, that is a vulnerability and something that puts us really in the danger zone. Same thing if we've got someone who's the founder of an organization or who has been there for a very long time and the organization has really kind of grown up around that individual. Also, if we needed to go out and hire someone, that person who's been there for 30, 40, extended period of time, it's very likely that their compensation is lower than market value and would be difficult financially for the organization to go out and hire someone at that same price. When we have limited internal talent, we've got an aging workforce that we're grappling with. And if we don't have an emergency succession plan, we'll talk a little bit more about the distinction there in a moment. And then I know a few of the folks on the call are board members of nonprofits. We need to make sure that our board is functioning at its highest and best so that if we do have some challenges or transitions happening at the staff leadership level, our board is positioned and able to step in as necessary. So obviously for the organization, it's about, sustainability and making sure that we have the right people in place. For staff management at that leadership level, succession plan is making sure not just that we have the right people, but we have the right people in the right places. Again, identifying those potential risks and vulnerabilities. If you have one person who holds all the IT knowledge, marketing knowledge, database knowledge, that's a real vulnerability for your organization should that person depart the organization. And then for the individuals, so for our team members, it's a way to identify what skill gaps we have, think about how we can motivate and stretch folks, and help people really see how they fit into the organization and building for the future as well. So succession planning really is an elephant in the room. What happens often is on the chief executive side, executive director, he or she may not bring up succession planning because that individual doesn't want the board to be thinking that they're considering going somewhere. And on the board side, we often don't bring it up because we don't want the chief executive to think that we're thinking about them potentially going somewhere. And so what happens is we just don't talk about it. But if there's one takeaway from our time together as we talk about succession planning, it's that we need to address it. As I said, it's insurance, it's about sustainability, and it's really, really important to just start those conversations, even if there's no indication or desire from either the board or the staff leadership side to be making a change, just to be preparing for that. So when we think about succession planning, we have emergency succession planning, which is somebody's out of pocket for 3-6 months or so, or departs the organization without notice. And then we have that departure defined or planned succession, where I'm the chief executive and I say to have a conversation with my board and say, I'm planning to retire in 3 years. And so we start that process at that point. So that you're looking at a point in the future. Both of them are absolutely important. Again, there are reasons why it's the elephant in the room and we don't talk about it. But as I said, we really need to spend the time and the energy to make sure that we are investing in succession planning. So whose responsibility is it for succession planning? The board owns the succession plan for the chief executive of the nonprofit organization. And just like the board has responsibility for hiring, managing, overseeing the chief executive, and then the chief executive has responsibility for everyone else within the organization, the same goes for succession planning. So the board owns the succession plan for the chief executive. The chief executive then owns the succession plan for the rest of the organization and is working with his or her leadership team and HR to make sure that those succession plans also align with development opportunities and training to to advance those individuals' skills so that they're prepared for what might come next. Another really important piece here is when we talk about succession planning, we can never make any promises. You know, it may be apparent to you who the heir might be, or the presumed next person to take a particular role, but until that is in place, we're not making any promises, and we're just talking about further development and opportunities to grow within the organization and helping people understand how every role is absolutely critical to success. So when we do succession planning, there are 4 basic steps here. We want to assess the organization, really understand the roles and the skills that we need, not just now, but what's happening in the future. We want to understand then who we have, who are the players, and what are the opportunities for them. And understanding where their strengths are, where the gaps are, and then working to develop them and understand how we can best prepare them for whatever might be next. And then you have the movement of folks, you know, moving them into new roles or bringing in individuals from the outside. So we're recruiting and filling those positions at that time. So a good succession plan is very clear about a number of things. So we understand what's needed in the position, both functionally and from the leadership side. So what are the skills that somebody needs to do to be able to function? And some of those obviously you can learn over time, and that's where a good professional development plan can come into place. And then what are the leadership attributes? Does somebody need to be a good speaker, have, you know, really, you know, be a strategic thinker? What does it take? A good leader of teams, etc. For some roles, we have particular licenses or education that is absolutely required, and so defining that. And then again, that emergency plan coverage. So if somebody's out of pocket for a period of time, who can step in to keep things moving forward? You know, what are those functional responsibilities, and who can fill in the short term? And then we're thinking long term. Who are 2 to 3 potential long-term successors, and how prepared are they, and what development do they need to get there? And then building a development plan so that they're in position as needed. As we think about what's needed with the next chief executive, it certainly depends on where your organization is going. I mean, there's some obvious attributes that are important. You know, obviously, you know, industry knowledge and fundraising and communications and being a visionary and strategic thinker, a team builder, a risk taker. But you also want to be thinking about what changes or external factors are affecting your organization or your specific mission area. You also want to be thinking about the financial health of your organization. Do you need someone who's going to come in and turn things around and make significant change to keep the organization going forward? Is there a big potential expansion happening? So all of those need to be factored into what we think about when we're doing that succession planning. So a few key takeaways here. Again, succession planning is a best practice. It's really critical for an organization's sustainability. As much as we have wonderful leaders in this community who have, you know, founded organizations and grown them over time, that organization needs to be able to fulfill its mission beyond that one individual or founding team of the organization. We want to think both emergency and short-term, as well as long-term. Both of those are critical in succession planning. Thinking about where the organization is going. As I said, making sure that we're not making promises to any individual about his or her position in the organization in the future. And then making sure that we are looking at multiple individuals and assessing individuals' capabilities currently, as well as their opportunities for developing further in the future. And my contact information is included in the presentation. Would be happy, again, to talk with any of you further.
And I will thank Julie for breaking down what can be such an emotional process and decision for us. And if you're struggling to get started, or you don't know, you need to update or what the next step is, absolutely reach out to somebody who has a lot of skill and can be a facilitator in the process. And I would say Julie is a good start.
All right, good morning, everyone. My voice is a little off. I'm fighting something, but I'm so happy to be here. I want to say thank you to everyone that's putting this on. And I also want to say thank you to each of you nonprofit leaders. You truly do help make the world a better place. And I know that your days are not easy. So hopefully I can give you over the next couple of minutes some tips around compensation, attraction, and retention, as I know that this is obviously a hot topic for all of us. All right, let me keep going here. All right, so what I'm going to do through this presentation is I'm going to give you some data, and then I'm going to give you some action. And before I actually dig into that, I realize that there are many of you who are members currently of ERC, and there's also a few of you that may have never heard of ERC before. So at ERC, we've been around for over 100 years. We are a 501c6 ourselves. What we are created, why we were formed, was to be a resource to organizations, both in the nonprofit and the profit industry, to say, let us help give you information that you need as leaders to run your businesses to the best that you can, to help you become a great workplace. So that's what we are all in this for. We are using data nonstop, presenting data to leaders over and over again. What I'm going to be sharing with you is a lot of information from our North Coast 99. So we also partner with Cleveland Magazine, and every September there is a supplement in the Cleveland Magazine that's all about North Coast 99. This year it was the Great Workplace Evolution. So since you're all going to be getting free subscriptions this year, make sure you look next September. You might even want to apply yourself to become part of North Coast 99. What we do is we evaluate your workplace practices, and then we also evaluate what your top performers are looking for. And we match that together so that we can give data out on what is driving top performers to stay, perhaps leave an organization. So all of that being said, one of the questions we said is, what was your organization's voluntary turnover rate in 2022? So what I would suggest you do is, if you aren't tracking this right now, this shouldn't be that hard to do. Go back, and if you want to do 2023 at this point, and say, okay, where do we fit? Are we in the highest? Are we in the average? Are we in the lowest? Based on how many people left our organization this year that we did not ask to leave, they left on their own accord. And just see where you are so that you at least know where you're starting from. We also like to look at word clouds because it really kind of draws out what people are saying. There's many reasons why top performers would leave, and there's many reasons why they would stay. If you look at the words on the left-hand side that are larger, so obviously one of the main concerns in the article that each of you voiced was that pay was a main concern. It clearly follows suit with the data that we have here. You'll also see some things like work-life balance. Perhaps that's something that we could control a little bit more. Change, I see that sticking out on why top performers would leave. Opportunities, company, leadership, advancement. Perhaps there's advancement happening at your organization that's not being communicated. So take a look at those words. But then also on the flip side, why top performers would choose to stay. Flexibility, the work. I always say, nonprofits, you are already ahead of the game when it comes to retaining talent or attracting talent, because you have missions that people are passionate about. So play to that. Work-life balance. Pay you see is a little bit smaller. Benefits, people, team. So again, this is just kind of some things for you as the leadership to think about why they would leave and then why they would also stay. And if any of these words that are larger on the stay side are not part of something that you're talking about at the leadership level or at the board level, anything like that, I would suggest that you start having some conversations around those. So again, I know compensation was the #1 issue. It seems to be #1 issue for every organization. But in response to a tight labor market and high inflation, which compensation related practices does your organization leverage? So these are just some poll questions that we asked. And so market pay analysis, 83% of organizations did do a market pay analysis. You might say, what is that? Determine the competitive compensation for each position within your organization. Identify the gaps. So if we'll just say a janitor's position, this is what the market pay is, this is what we're paying, here's the gap. and then make recommendations. You're probably not going to be able to achieve all of these this year, maybe not even next year, maybe not even in 3 years, but at least know where you need to go, and perhaps communicate that with the staff or with your board, have conversations around, we are here, here's where we need to go. I'm going to talk a little bit about compensation philosophy. You don't always need to be paying at the top of the range of a position, because there's many other factors, as we saw on the word cloud, the slide before, why employees would stay. So communicate with your employees about your total rewards and your employee value proposition. That's what EVP stands for. Again, sometimes there was just a lack of communication why people were leaving the organization. Maybe you need to increase pay for hard to fill or business critical roles. When you think about the time that it takes to find somebody, onboard them, train them, all of those, maybe it's worth trying to find a few extra dollars for those positions. Market pay adjustments for hot skill jobs. Give bonuses in lieu of pay increases. Bonuses are instant. We do know people do like instant in our world that we're in today, so perhaps that's one way to do that. Offer new hires sign-on bonuses, and provide non-cash incentives to offset commuting costs. So then what I want to do is share some, that's kind of the data, what organizations are doing. Here are some things that you could do. Communicate changes. Use a version of pay transparency that works for your culture. I know in some organizations, everyone's talking to pay transparency and doing that, but that doesn't mean that you have to. What you need to do is be consistent, of course, but determine what kind of communication you want to do with your employees. Revisit your compensation philosophy. Does this philosophy still match the goals of your organization, or does it need updating? Hint, hint, we might see this a little bit later in my poll question. But this is really important because it not only gives you and the board kind of a focus as to where you are with compensation, where you want to go, but then you can communicate with your employees so they know before they come on board or when they're on board what your compensation philosophy is. Geographic pay, consider pay differentials for other locations, and shore up problem areas or high risk areas. Know where the highest turnover is occurring and what roles are essential. Again, use the data. Sometimes you're not even thinking about, oh, why does it seem like that one department has higher turnover? Perhaps it's pay, perhaps it's other things. Data, data, and more data. Use reliable local sources of compensation data. For those of you that are already ERC members, you have access to compensation data depending on your tier. If you are not an ERC member, we're going to send you a flyer after this. I would encourage you because you can get the compensation data at your fingertips. We like to say at ERC, do not be reactive, be proactive. So before somebody comes in and hands you something that says, I need a $70,000 raise, even a $10,000 raise, $5,000 raise, make sure that you have the data and says, well, here's our compensation philosophy. You're paid in this range based on what we're looking for. This is where we're going to stand, so that you are not reactive on your heels, but you're proactive. Now, I know another issue that we discussed is talent attraction, employment brand defined. Does your organization have a documented employment brand? Many of these organizations said yes. A few said no. I would encourage you, if you don't have a documented employment brand, to make sure that you do that. And here's some 5 tips how to do that. Network on social media. So showcase current and new employees. This is absolutely free. Social media, you just need to assign it to somebody. People like to take pics. So put them up there and showcase all the fun things that you're doing. Qualifications are not all or nothing. If a job description hasn't been updated in a while and it doesn't really matter if they can lift a 20-pound box anymore, take it off of your job description. But also, if you have somebody who's a math major, perhaps they can be a great project manager or not even need a college education. Dedicated in-house recruiter, use employee feedback. If you haven't done a pulse or an engagement survey, please make sure that you do that. That's just going to give you the real data that you need. ERC could help with that. And growth opportunities. Again, people want to know where they're going to be in a few years. I'm sure many of you do as well. Share career paths and commitment to development at the outset. Last but not least is retention. Which retention mechanisms or strategies did you utilize in 2022? Regularly ask for feedback, increase base pay 98%, that's at the top. Ongoing performance feedback and team building, especially the younger generations, they are looking for continuous feedback. Make sure that you're doing that. Stay interviews, flexible hybrid schedules, and mentorship program. And then the action for you on retention, bring your teams together, break down the silos, incorporate team building and fun. A day in the life, allow somebody to go see what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. You might learn some great things there. Shifting to real-time feedback, again, the instant pair ongoing check-ins with annual reviews, acting on feedback. Yes, do those surveys and remember to take action. Don't ever do an engagement survey if you're not willing to kind of share the results and also take action. You don't have to take action on everything. You don't have to take action right away, but at least recognize that you heard what the employees were saying. That's most important. That will help. And then building lasting connections with intention and purpose, build meaningful relationships, especially if remote. I know I'm up against time. I want to say that at ERC, we just did another poll last week on paid holidays off in the nonprofit industry for 2024. The minimum number of paid holidays off is 8.5 days. The average is 12.5 days. The maximum is 17 days. Now, this is on a poll that we did just last week. So I would say if you have any wiggle room to add an additional holiday paid time off, that could also help with your attraction and retention. And we're going to follow up, myself and then Annie Donnell from ERC, to help answer, because I'm sure I probably made even more questions than answers there. So
Thank you, Kelly. That's such a hot topic. So
I'm Danielle Locke. I am a professional fundraiser. I've been in the industry 20 years. In my business, I help frustrated nonprofit directors find their unique mix of fundraising ingredients so that they can raise more, do more, and stress less. And much like our technology difficulties, I come to fundraising from a place of things just don't always go the way that they're supposed to go, especially in nonprofits. I have incredible empathy for the people, staff working in nonprofit, because you are doing the good work and struggling with it every day, all of the responsibilities, and things don't always go well. So I know that much of your time is spent putting out fires and working on, oh, there I am. And working it in. So one of the things I just wanted to kind of give you a couple of quick tips on how to fit fundraising in, because you're doing all of the things all of the time, and yet you still need to raise unrestricted dollars to be able to manage your programs and grow your programming. So how do you do all of that? Well, you don't do it all at once. And so you bite off a little bit at a time so that you can, like this little mouse, get to all of your cheese. So here are, I think, about 8 tips. First one is put together an annual fundraising calendar. Do not dilute your efforts. This is one of the things, when I work with clients, we do just a simple grid, January, February, March, April, and we sketch out when there are events and programming and communications and grant deadlines, because very often, like with my one client here, you know, they were doing literally 5 different campaigns in December, and it's too much. It's too much for your staff, it's too much from a resource standpoint, and it's too much for your donors to absorb. They don't know what to respond to. So if you spread it out a little bit, and maybe you don't need to do everything in December, maybe you can do it in February, maybe you can do something over the summer. This is a very simple exercise, but I have found it to be rather mind-blowing for many of the nonprofits I work with. It's just kind of sketch it all out on paper so that everyone's on the same page. Oops, hold on. There. Tack, this is one of the things I work with a lot with clients, is tack appeals and things that you're doing onto already scheduled activities. If you're sending a newsletter, if you're doing an event, if you have any programmatic mailings, if you are doing programs in the community, you know, and maybe you're not asking for support at all of those things, you should be building in at least a soft ask. Anytime you're in front of potential stakeholders, people that care about your organization and your mission. You know, one of the clients I worked with, Bethany Fellows, has a national presence, and they work with young pastors in churches and help them to acclimate to the business of running a church. And one of the things that we found in going through their work was that they had people that were graduating from the program, but they weren't asking those graduates to make a gift. They then started asking those graduates for a list of potential family and friends who might want to be added to the newsletter list and potentially could become donors. They were sending emails and communications to alumni about their programming, but never asked them to make a gift. People want to be asked. They want to be a part of the work that you're doing. They want to be inspired. So do not be afraid to make that ask. It's an invitation to support your mission and your movement. I'll just say use and reuse your stories. I get this a lot. We used that story last year, that success story, we put in the newsletter, we can't use it again. Really, no one remembers, people are busy, no one will mind. People have very, very busy lives, personal and professional, and it takes a lot for people to absorb information and to react and be inspired. So feel free. I'm doing this with a client right now. We had an amazing success story. We used it in a fall newsletter as part of an overall article, and now we're using it for the end of year mailer campaign, as well as for a social media campaign. We're just kind of dividing it in bits and pieces. But it's inspirational and it's amazing. And why not tell that story more than once? It's not like people are going to object to hearing good news over and over. If you leave here with one piece of advice that I can give you, and that is to never stop talking about monthly recurring donations. If you are not doing this, and it is amazing, but so many nonprofits that I talk to haven't yet built this out. Monthly recurring donations, you can see the statistics there. It is a gold mine of increased revenue, stable revenue stream. It's easier for your donors, it's easier for your staff. And just like that magazine subscription that you forgot about, people generally, if they're doing $10 or $20 a month for your nonprofit, tend to forget about it. They're unlikely to cancel. It creates a sense of community of people that know that they're in this club that's supporting you every month. Make sure that you have a platform that allows that. Invite people to become a monthly donor in your communications, put it in your newsletter, put it in your donation page, make it a pop-up when people make a donation. Invite people to turn their one-time donation into a monthly donation, either in the pop-up thank you screen or again, also in their thank you email when they make a donation. The math is simple. If someone makes a $50 donation, that's fantastic. But they can make $10 per month and dramatically increase the impact on your organization, both from a steady revenue stream as well as from increased gift that they're giving you. Okay, good. Don't rent a mailing list to build your list. Lots of nonprofits that I work with, they go to their local mail house or their printer and they rent a list based on geography, people that are in their community that might be interested in their mission. They invite these people to an event. Folks have never heard of you, and they're unlikely to take action unless you're going to spend gobs and gobs of money on advertising and digital marketing and billboards and newsletters. People that are cold to you and don't know who you are, they don't know you, like you, or trust you, are unlikely to take action. You want to build your list of people that you're inviting to your events and getting newsletters from interested people that have come to your events, people that have subscribed to your social media, people that have subscribed to your newsletter, referrals from board members or other program participants. When I work with clients, I pull a list. I use a wealth screening tool like iWave. You might know Wealth Engine or Donor Search. And I pull a list of people that are active donors. And then we divide it down based on their age, their geography, and their interest. Do they give to arts and culture? Do they give to animal rescue? It's not just a cold list of general people that live near you. It's people that are interested in the work that you do, regardless of where they live. Take care of your donors. There are so many nonprofits that come to me that they just say, we just need donors. We just need new donors. Our donors don't give. Our donors don't have capacity. I guarantee you that you have major donors that are hiding in your list. You might not know them. You might not have personal connection to all the people in your database. But again, when I work with clients, I'll run a wealth screening. I'll put their donor list into iWave and it'll match it against national records of giving records. And it'll tell me which of their donors have more capacity. And you'll find that some lovely old lady that gives $20 a month has huge capacity, but you just don't know. So you need to build that relationship. Of course, look at your donors in a different way. Look at past donors, past board members, folks that are giving you $20 every month for the last 5 years. Those are people that are really invested in your organization. All right, on wrapping up here. One of the things, again, you have a whole lot of things going on. One of the clients that I work with, she books on her schedule 8:30 every morning for 30 minutes of donor cultivation. We pick 5 people that we know that we can, if we engage with them and build a meaningful relationship with them, we can get them to give at a higher level. We are connecting with them, we are educating them. So that 30 minutes a day, write thank you notes, make phone calls, put notes in your CRM. One of the things that I do is I just keep a stack of thank you notes on my desk. Anytime that somebody does something that I appreciate, whether it's a vendor or a staff person, I just scribble a little note and send it out. But it's about the consistency. And if you do that just a little bit every day, or even twice a week, it will get you so much farther in your cultivation. Lastly, potential donations are everywhere. So like I said, I hear a lot of there are not enough donors to go around, the economy is tough, people just can't afford to give, this is not a good time to give, the stock market's down. They just attended an event, they bought a ticket, we can't ask them again. But donors, greater level donors, new donors can be found everywhere. And the story that I'll quickly tell you as I wrap is that I had a client who was a youth orchestra. I went to their concert. I met actually ran into a mutual donor. She was a grandmother of one of the musicians, and she had never been solicited for a gift. Now, this is a major donor who has given 5- and 6-figure gifts to many other nonprofits that I've worked with. But because she was a grandmother, she had only bought tickets through their ticket system. She had never been migrated over into an appeal list. And so hence she'd never been asked. So she pretty much attacked me and was like, how do I do more? How do I get more? And ended up doing a very sizable scholarship fund for that organization. I helped them to, engage that relationship and get to know her. And the lesson that we learned was to make sure that that you might have membership, you might have different people in different places. Make sure that you're communicating with everybody because they want to know and they want to support you, and it doesn't have to take up tons of your time. You can fit it in. And that's me. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to help in any way. Email me on social, whatever I can do to help.
Thank you, Danielle. That's always a topic that people struggle with. Yeah, so I'm going to talk today about, having financial success and being true to your mission. And, we've heard it was in the article, Julie touched on it, I think Kelly touched on it as well, is that, tax exempt is, or being an exempt organization is a taxing status, not a business plan. And while you may not be profit motivated, you are mission motivated. And if you want to be viable for the long term, for sure, you're going to need to look at having financial success so that you can be viable. And I think so much of what our other presenters told us is going to kind of dovetails into this. And I think if you do things like succession planning, having strong leaders in place, and you manage, and your staffing and the fundraising, you will have financial success. I mean, those aren't the only things, but I think those are the big things. If you can get those big things down, I think, then you can knock out the little ones. But today, just for our discussion purposes, I think, when it comes to running like a business, there's some things, and I call them the 2 B's, budgeting and benchmarking, that you should look at and use as tools to help you look and see what is your financial health. Are you successful? Are you going to have a viability for the long term to continue doing the mission work that you're doing? Budgeting, do not just dive in and start taking it. Please do not just necessarily take last year and say, this is what it's going to look like. But make sure everybody who's at the table can answer these 4 questions and everybody's giving the same answer. So what is your mission? Who are you serving? What do your clients need? You know, I was at a food pantry once and they said they would come and you get a week's worth of non-perishable groceries. But they would go out into the parking lot at the end of the night and people, they didn't want to say no, but they would take out of the bag and leave in the parking lot the things that they weren't going to eat. And it was a lot of the same type of things. So it's, you know, it's, I think thinking about how you're going to spend your resources and what do people really need. Knowing what success looks like. In a for-profit world, it's the bottom line. But what is it for you? And oftentimes it's a non-financial item. But I think you have to know what that looks like so you can build it from there. And once you know all of that, then you begin budgeting. Keep in mind, budgeting is a plan. You're not going to hit all of the areas right on the head. It's going to be detailed. Hopefully it, you know, kind of matches up with your internal reporting, because, you know, that's kind of what you're going to ultimately, it's, you know, spoiler alert coming down. In the end, you're going to be comparing what you have budgeted to what the actual results are at some interval. And that just makes that process easier from a reporting standpoint to look at the data and analyze it. Budgeting, you know, how to start if you've never started, or, you know, or if you're starting, maybe this is a good thing to have some, you know, some guidelines or some structure for you. The good part is with budgeting, and I think the same things can be said with benchmarking, is that there are no rules. You can kind of customize this to be how you want it, but make sure you have all the right people at the table. It should not start and end with the CFO. You should be talking to the spenders, to the fundraisers, you know, and get from them on both sides, like, how much do you need to make and how much are you going to spend? And please, please, please do not calculate how much you're going to spend and then take that number and transfer it over into fundraising, because fundraising may have some thoughts on what the likelihood and the reality is on getting all of those funds. The other part is plan for the unexpected. You know, have a contingency line, and it doesn't have to be a big amount. It could be 1%. And it is for truly the unknown. It is not for somebody to say, oh, it's okay for me to go over on this event spending or to spend extra in my program activity. It's truly the unknown. Also, plan for success. Your bottom line should be positive in your budget. You, once again, you want to have that surplus so that you can have that financial viability. And then, you know, the what's next is the, you know, whatever interval you're looking at your internal reporting, most likely monthly, you want to look at that budget to actual. You're probably going to look at by a program level in a greater detail than maybe what the board gets, and look and see, you know, there'll be some significant variances. They might be okay, but then, you know, there might be some things that are not okay. And like, let's, you know, cut the problem, you know, as soon as we can. Underspending is just as much of an issue then as overspending. Benchmarking, I put in here the definition right from Webster's. When you're a nonprofit, it's, you know, you're comparing your performance and your processes with another nonprofit so that you can see how, like, what are ways that maybe you could improve and you can grow. And that's the thing, you want to get to that next level. You know, you just want to constantly, like we all do individually, to be constantly improving. Benchmarking, start with your historical data, which means you have to have good data. It has to be accurate, and it should be consistent so that you have apples to apples. Benchmarking, decide who you want to look at. You know, you probably want organizations that are similar mission size, maybe geography. Do you want to look at something at a point in time or year over year? Both have their places. I think year over year is usually like that trend I kind of like. However, you know, during those COVID years, it's probably looking at 20 and 21 even was probably not worthwhile process. Consider outliers and remove them if necessary. Everything, though, caution, everything cannot be an outlier. Everywhere place that you are way over or way below whoever you're looking at, it's like, oh, well, we're different. And that could be true, but it's not true all of the time. where you can find information. I say, look at industry groups. I know a number of nonprofits that have CFO groups in there, like, so everybody's a part of a museum, or they're all part of they all have assisted living facilities, and they get together at some interval and they just talk about what their challenges are, what solutions they found, things they've tried and worked, things they've tried and they haven't worked. You might even have industry associations where you are like a paid member of something, of a group, and they're all museums, you're all assisted living, keeping with my theme there. There's also some subscription databases such as like Candid, or it's the GuideStar. Candid's the new name, but I don't think it's taken off. However, just caution, the GuideStar is based on 990 filings, so sometimes you might have different years because you're just really, you can't control when people file their 990 and when the IRS posts it. Also, like ERC, I mean, especially if labor is, a significant portion of your budget, if you're a member of ERC, they can provide you some data looking at salary, wage, benefits to see like, how are you? And I think I'm going to talk about, there's a few key benchmarks that people look at, and one is revenue, but I'm going to switch here. But payroll is another one, and payroll is a key one because you want to see how you compare to market. But it's like, are you competitive? I mean, wow. I mean, like it's like, whoever thought this was going to be so hot? I mean, it's like, it's such a big topic. What is your percentage of benefits that you're paying people? What's your percentage of merit adjustments? Things that keep you competitive. It used to always be compensation, but anymore it's, there's other things too that you need to look at. And as Kelly said, can you add another holiday in there? I'm just going to switch back. Revenue is a key benchmark that people always look at. When you look at revenue in total, it tells you volume, how large somebody is. It doesn't tell you about efficiency, if you're, in mission impact. But you want to look at percentages of revenue, like how much do they have in philanthropy, just, straight up donors versus governments and grants and investments. So, some of these you have to, you just don't want to look at the total number in there. And I say the same thing with fundraising. It shows you how much they raised and how good that they are at raising money. It doesn't tell you like how good they are at fulfilling their mission, or if they even really netted money on their fundraiser. Same thing with program efficiency. It tells you the percentage you set on programs. Well, that is a very key number, and a lot of outside sources, especially savvy donors, look at that. I mean, it's not telling you efficiency. Like, did you use the best use of your dollars? Program effectiveness, your accomplishments, and that's where that becomes important, getting those things in your marketing materials, in your 990. And then just, there are some other like those are mostly income statement, like revenue and expense items, things looking at current ratios, your operating surplus, like how much cash, do you have enough cash on hand to make it for 6 months, to pay for 6 months of expenses. There was a recent study pre-pandemic, only 30% of nonprofits had that 6 months, and 25% had none. And if COVID taught us anything, we need to have those, rainy day funds. I know that was fast. So if there's questions, definitely put them in the chat and I will follow up, because I am already over time. There's my contact information, and I appreciate all of you for taking your time to come online with us today. And I also appreciate all of our other panelists who lend their expertise and their time to all of us.